This construction that I'm showing you right here isn't California high-speed rail. It's actually a project that spans multiple states, has had way more problems, and costs even more than the rail project. This is Interstate I69, and it's been plagued with issues, and its construction is taking more than 3 decades. But unless you live close to where it's going to run, you probably haven't heard of it, have you? Compared to the high-speed rail project, there has been little national coverage, no anti-project editorials in big newspapers, and it appears like everyone has just accepted I69 as the status quo. Why is a project that has almost double the amount of issues, disrupts vastly more land, and is terrible for the environment not talked about in a negative national light, especially when compared to California high-speed rail? Well, today we're going to talk about that and how transit always gets the short end of the stick in American media. For the few of you who don't know what California high-speed rail is, it's a slam-dunk backbone for California's transportation system. For years, California has been slowly building up its Amtrak and regional services around its cities, but a crucial link between the Bay Area and Los Angeles has always been missing. The high-speed rail project is the answer to this. Not only will it finally have a decent connection between the two cities, but it will also provide the best way to get between the two metro areas. The train will be slightly slower than flying, but you won't have to deal with security and bag fees, and it's entirely powered by renewable energy compared to the high CO2 output of cars and planes, respectively. California high-speed rail is currently under construction in the Central Valley of California. You can currently see the massive viaducts and bridges going up as part of its right-of-way. Just like Interstate I69, the high-speed rail project is a massive infrastructure project that is going to change how people live and do work in the area once it's completed. Interstate 69 is similar to California high-speed rail because both projects have had major issues along the course of their construction. Interstate 69 continues to have issues, but we never hear about it, which is kind of confusing because the California project has pretty much sorted out basically all of its main problems, but it still continues to get bombarded with bad press. Why is this? Well, the first reason has less to do with the thesis of this video, but it's still very important. The first reason why transit projects often get harder scrutiny is because most Americans just don't understand trains. In most of the country, riding or using a train even once a year is rare, so most Americans give no thought to how and why they work. This is exemplified in politicians when they talk about transit projects. They will often have lofty or impossible goals for a project because they themselves don't understand how trains work in the first place. Oftentimes, engineers designing a project and the politicians approving it have different expectations. The politicians might convince people of insane speeds or project goals when it was a misunderstanding of the engineer explaining trains in the first place to them. You see, it's kind of a vicious cycle. With highways, this isn't as hard though. Basically, every American understands how they work and what they're used for because most people use them daily, so usually there's no misunderstanding to be had at any point. Though this is not to say that state DOTs aren't malicious with their projects because they sure as hell are, but that's a topic for another video. Anyway, even if Interstate 69 is objectively a worse project than California high-speed rail, people are going to be more skeptical of the rail project because here in America, our train riding knowledge is minimal to say the least. The second reason for the extra scrutiny is that there are large forces and companies that do not want to see transit succeed, and there are two types of business-related reasons why people do not want to see transit to be successful. The first type is companies and people that are heavily invested in an industry that benefits from not having good transit. This would include airlines that fly shorter routes that could easily be high-speed rail connections instead. A good example of this is when the airline Southwest openly lobbied the Texas government to block high-speed rail projects within Texas between its major cities. This is all too common in the US, but the average person never sees this in the news because a large company lobbying the government doesn't really make eye-catching headlines, does it? Oil companies are the other main culprit. They consistently lobby against transit projects and instead lobby for high highway and car-based infrastructure. One recent example of this was when oil barons known as the Koch brothers made a campaign in Nashville to scare voters out of selecting the option to build a new transit system for the city, and instead redirected funds for more highway construction. And a reminder for those who need it, building just one more lane, bro, does not fix traffic. Anyway, along with those devious reasons, anyone that calls themselves a neoliberal or any other similar ideology-wise will always seethe when it comes to bigger government transit projects. The reason is because transit is almost always government-owned and operated. In the United States and any place where capitalism is pretty much worshipped, there's always an obsession to run the government like it's a private business. Which, when it comes to transit, doesn't really make sense. People forget that there are economic benefits to transit past just making money through fares. And later, those same people will drive to work on toll-free interstate highways. But let's forget about that. People generally hate when things are taken away from them, like free highways that we don't really think much about. But why is there never scrutiny about freeways and it's always about transit instead? It's a weird austerity mindset that's been beaten into our heads for years, and we never really ask why. When people talk about austerity politics, they usually imagine their grandfather giving them a stern lecture about spending $10 in their pocket on candy, or something like that, which is fine. Except that government spending doesn't work that way, and over it's shown that in hindsight, Americans usually hate politicians that cut budgets and try austerity measures. This is why when we talk about California high-speed rail or any other transit projects like the Purple Line in Maryland, I really don't care how much they cost, because here in the US we spend tons of money on shit like this, and this. But dear lord, if a positive climate project like a train is over budget, oh shit, I have to write 50 articles about it and forget all of the history about highway construction and spending in this country. A reminder that just the first federal bill for highways adjusted for inflation from 1956 would be over $550 billion today. But I guess we just forgot how to spend money or something. But if we do care about lowering cost of construction in this country, we have to do two things with government projects. Number one, avoid contractors at all cost. Do as much stuff as you possibly can in-house. Let me tell you about a story that my dad has told me. He's worked in quality assurance as an engineer, so he often has to check on manufacturers when something breaks or goes wrong with the final product. One time, a critical system failed, and he had to go to the final manufacturer and ask them where to get the info on the part that failed. The manufacturer then told him that the valve assembly that failed was not made by them and to go to manufacturer number 2. Manufacturer number 2 told him that the part of the valve that failed was a release mechanism, so he had to go to manufacturer number 3. Manufacturer number 3 told him that the part that failed was a spring that was calibrated wrong. So my dad then had to drive out to a random shop in Long Island where an old Italian guy with a specific spring manufacturing machine from the 1960s then explained to him what was wrong. All of this labor and paperwork could have been avoided if the first manufacturer just made everything in-house. This not only applies for mechanical engineering, but also for civil engineering projects like transit infrastructure. Do not contract out parts of your project to save money in the first place, because you'll end up spending a lot more money later on bullshit that arises like this. The second way that you can lower costs is keep building and don't stop. When you build infrastructure, don't stop after one project, because all the knowledge that your workers gain from building that first project can be applied to the next one. So stopping and starting infrastructure construction, especially transit, is a terrible idea. So if you want your construction cheaper, follow these rules. Another reason why people hate government-run transit is because it's harder to sneak in parasitic middlemen into a public agency. Not that it doesn't happen, but public ownership is inherently against this type of thing. Also, to add to this, the government will constantly get scrutiny over how they spend money, but a private corporation can waste all the money in the world and never get the same attention. Brightline is notable for this, as it's constantly compared to the California project and other train lines like Amtrak. But Brightline doesn't care about making a profit off of fares, and instead plans to make most of the money back using real estate investments. But no one ever mentions that. Instead, they just soy face over private company doing trains. Dear God, all of the people that would freak out if a state or federal government tried doing the same business strategy here. Brightline and private rail services deserve their own video at some point, but realize that sometimes certain train services can't be comparable because of the limitations in business models of each. To close out, I want to bring up the Shinkansen. The Shinkansen is the classic Japanese bullet train that everyone loves to bring up when talking about high-speed trains. The original Shinkansen route from Tokyo to Osaka actually had a very similar story to California high-speed rail. Not only did it suffer from many political and funding setbacks, but it also went double over budget, from 200 billion yen to 400 billion yen. But no one ever mentions that when talking about Japan's bullet trains. They only talk about how wonderful and pleasant the system is to use. Once infrastructure is built and working, most people quickly forget the price and just start enjoying the system. I'd much rather have a climate-friendly system like California high-speed rail being built than a climate denial piece of infrastructure like Interstate I69 is. Transit projects are so essential to becoming carbon neutral because electric cars and techno bullshit aren't going to save us. I have a whole video about that here. Anyway, hopefully you can see the point of view I'm coming from when I say that I honestly don't care about transit project cost overruns, because I'd much rather have the money being spent there versus on highways and other bullshit. And no, there's no money pinch, just build the damn things. I'd like to thank my Patreons for helping keep these videos ad-free, and I'd also like to thank you for making it through this policy-heavy video. I do have merch if you like transit-related things, but otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.